Alright guys, welcome back to another Unreal Engine 5 tutorial, and today we are going to be talking about the the Foliage tool. Foliage is one of the best tools to allow you to quickly add assets to your project on Unreal Engine 5 and essentially design levels really well and really quickly. So before we get started, if you haven't already, go ahead and get this Landscape Pro 2.0 AutoGen to kind of help you out with this tutorial project. If you don't have this downloaded, then you won't need it for this tutorial, but you would need it for the landscape painting tutorial. As you can see, I've already kind of painted the landscape a little bit. Go check out my last tutorial if you want to see how to do this. And now I think it's ready for a little bit of foliage. So to begin off here, to open up foliage, you're either going to hold shift and click 3, or you can come here and just click the drop down, and you will be able to now add some foliage. So first thing I want to go ahead and do here is make a distinction between a static mesh and a static mesh foliage. Static mesh foliage is designed to be used with the foliage tool. Static mesh actors are designed to be used in selection and other tools as well, and essentially be dragged and dropped into the scene kind of like this. Okay. So going into the foliage tool now, it's very easy to change a static mesh into a static mesh foliage. All you do is just find a static mesh you like, maybe from Quixelbridge. Maybe I want this ramp to be a static mesh foliage, or this statue. I'm just going to simply drag this into the foliage here, and it's now going to create a new foliage tool. All right, so now that we have a static mesh foliage here, let's go ahead and talk about the various brush settings here. The brush size is the size of your brush, very straightforward. The density is how much of the given static mesh foliage is going to place inside of this brush. So if I have this be really high, this is going to place a large amount of statues, as you'll see here. As you can see, many little glass statues here. Okay, you can also erase here by going to erase and by holding shift. If you hold shift with the paint tool, it'll automatically go to the erase, as you can see here. Okay, if I go ahead and now lower the density, you'll see much less of the static meshes foliage placed, right? And you can actually see this in numbers here. It actually keeps track of how much is being placed here. Again, going really high, we got almost 4,000 statues. Going really low, see how much we get. We got 242. So that's essentially the density. It determines how much of a given one is going to place in an area. Now let's say that I put the density really high and I try and cover this entire area with this asset, for example with grass, and I decide, you know what, that's too many statues. I can actually come here to the erase density and change how much is going to be erased. 0 will erase all of it. So if I hold shift again and start erasing, it'll erase all of it, right? If I change this to, let's say, 0.38, this will now only erase 1 minus 0.38 is 0.62. Yeah, so 62% of it's now going to only be erased. So if I erase here, you'll actually see not all of it gets, not all of it's going to get erased kind of all at once. You'll see here it starts to slowly erase, but it doesn't really erase everything. And then the lower this number gets, the more it's going to erase. And so if you get all the way down to 0, it will erase all of it there. So that's essentially what this erase density does. Paint determines how much it paints. Erase determines how much it erases. Pretty straightforward. Moving right along here, you can add foliage here as well instead of dragging it in from the content door. And these are all your static mesh foliage actors. So let's go ahead and select some here. I'm going to go ahead and get some grass. Boom. And I'm going to go ahead and get some rocks. Boom. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. I'm going to go ahead and get some trees. And boom. So what's nice about the foliage tool is you can select multiple foliages to paint all at the same time. You select what you want to paint by simply just check marking here. And as you can see, now when I paint here, all 3 of these assets are going to paint. I got 5 rocks, I got 18 trees, and I got 2,200 grass, and it's all right here as well. So natural obvious question is, why did it only place 5 rocks, 18 trees, and 2,000 grass? It seems like it placed a lot more grass than it did the other actors. And that's because of these settings right here. So each one of these little components here, you can actually customize how much of it is going to paint, as well as size, its alignment, collision and physics, and a whole bunch of stuff here. So if I come to my rock static mesh actor here, I can change the type of static mesh here. As you can see, I can alter it right there. We won't talk about the component class. I can also change the density of how much this rock is going to place here, as well as the radius and the scaling. Keep in mind, scaling is done on 3 axes. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a round table here so we can see. So you have your x-axis, which is this red arrow, the y-axis, which is this green arrow, and the z-axis, which is the blue arrow. And just like before, we've seen, you can scale in x, you can scale in y, and you can scale in z. You can also scale uniform, which is all at the same time. Going back over to the foliage tool, if I select here, you'll notice that I have a scaling uniform. This is going to scale all at the same time, this specific amount. Now, the min here essentially means that that's the minimum size. Notice that not all grass is going to be the same height, right? So you're going to want some randomness in the size of the grass because obviously not all grass is the same height. Same thing with rocks. Rocks aren't all going to be the exact same height. This rock is going to be slightly bigger than this rock because rocks just aren't all the same height. And you can customize this randomness range right here. The smaller the minimum is, the smaller the rock's going to be. The larger the max is, the larger your biggest rocks are going to be. Okay? The offset here determines how high it is off of the ground. So if you see here, some of these rocks are actually in the ground and they actually have a little bit of offset. So for example, this rock right here is a little bit higher up into the ground than this rock. And the offset of the z-axis is customized here with the same min and max randomness. The align to normal is just simply whether things are going to align with the normal, which essentially is the z-axis. So if I go back over to the selection mode here and I select our little desk wherever it was, your normal is the z-axis, essentially what's going to be perpendicular with the ground. Now keep in mind, sometimes you're going to be on a hill, which means that if I place this directly normal, sometimes it will be unable to place. So we're going to look at the random slope angle in a second, but sometimes it'll be able to place like this, but other times it's going to align its normal to be with the terrain. So you may get things that look kind of like this. Now there are ways to customize this and get around this, but keep in mind that now the normal, this is not aligned to normal, essentially is what I'm saying. Like the normal is going, as you can see, directly up, but clearly there's a nice little sloping angle here. Sometimes the paint tool can't align it perfectly to normal, so if you notice stuff isn't painting, that's probably one of the reasons why, especially when it comes to trees. All right, you also have an average normal. The average normal is essentially like it takes the entire radius and it does like a check of the terrain and generates kind of what it thinks is the average like upward axis of the Z, depending on the hills and stuff of the terrain. So that's essentially that. You also have a max align angle, which determines how much it will be adjusted away from the vertical angle. Random yaw. So if you want the angle of orientation to have randomness, then you can customize this here with some random yaw. And you can also have a random pitch angle, which determines how much it gets pitched in a specific direction. Now, this one right here, the ground slope angle, is somewhat important. This determines on the initial placement how much angular tilt there can be. And this is somewhat important because I'll go ahead and show you with trees here. Sometimes if you have this set exactly at 0 here, and no random gnaw, none of this, sometimes you'll have an issue with this actually placing on mountains. As you can see, it's not placing here. That's because in order for this to place, it needs a little bit of a way to align this to the ground. Right now it's trying to place like a tree in space and it really can't do it, right? So that's why you need sometimes like a ground slope angle here to allow the tree to actually place in the area even with a little bit of slope, right? I'm gonna go ahead and turn my brush setting down here. So it sometimes does need that little bit of slope here, as you can see, just to place, or it won't be able to do it. And as you can see, I have the align to normal turned off. And then if I go ahead and turn this stuff back on here, and I give it that right there, maybe a little bit of random pitch here and a little bit of a max align angle, you're going to get more of that slanted look, as you can see here. So that's essentially what those do, and you can really see this if I just use the single tool here. As you can see with those settings now on, you now have much greater tilt in the tree. So essentially that's what those simple settings do. Nothing too crazy on those settings, but essentially they determine the angle and orientation of the static mesh foliage actor that you are placing. Next, you have a little bit of physics stuff that you can customize here. You also have how the lighting works with it, as well as wanting to be able to move it, or whether it's static in the scene. We won't go over call distance. There's a lot of stuff in the documentation about this. That's a little bit beyond the scope of this video. You can also customize the collisions here as well. So if you want to customize any collisions, that's going to be right here. And again, we won't cover this right here. This is a little bit more advanced stuff. These are the main settings that you're going to be using. And that's pretty much it for foliage. Just a couple of small little things. I just want to go over these settings here. If you want to select a specific foliage, just like so, and move it around, scale, and rotate it, you have the ability to do that right there. So if I want to make this grass really big, I can make that specific grass really big. If you wanted to select all of a specific asset, right, or all of a specific foliage, you would come here to the all, and you could select all, as you can see. And that will select all the foliage of a specific type or a specific area, and you can manipulate that foliage just the same as you would anything else. You can also deselect, as I'm sure you all are aware. Pretty easy to go through. You can also lasso select. So if I want to select just the specific area here of trees, make sure I have all my guys checked here. Boom. If I just wanted to select this specific area, the lasso select will allow me to do so, and then of course I can move it around and change where it is and scale it and so on. Cool. Paint tool we've already done. Let's say you want to reapply certain settings down here. Let's say you wanted to make this all movable, for example. You could paint and then reapply, and that will reapply the specific settings over where you paint. If you wanted to place a single specific foliage, then you would use the single tool, just like so, and it will place single foliages of whatever you have selected. So if I just wanted one tree, for example, this is now placing a singular tree. The fill tool, very nice tool here. If I go ahead and just get a ramp here, and I'm going to go ahead and scale up this ramp. The fill tool essentially allows you to cover a static mesh actor in your scene, not a foliage, a static mesh actor. If you wanted to cover this with a specific foliage, you would use the fill tool. And as you can see here, it covered it. Looks kind of wonky, but this is essentially, you can use this to cover. And then of course you can move things around and remove things as well. And that's pretty much it for the basics of foliage. So if this video helped you out in any ways, please like and subscribe to our channel, and I will see you all in the next one.